This little bottle you're seeing in this man's hand doesn't look like much. You can pick it up for under $2 at any pharmacy, corner store, or convenience shop across the country. And yet, there are mechanics with 40 years in the trade who will swear on their life that this right here is the single most important thing you can put inside an engine. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. There is a fluid that protects the internal surfaces of an engine in a way that no modern synthetic oil can even come close to. A fluid that engineers at the world's biggest refineries know very well, that has over 100 years of documentation in technical archives, and that quietly disappeared from commercial automotive oils exactly 9 decades ago. Not because it failed, not because it was dangerous, but because somebody up top decided it was no longer convenient for the market. Convenient for who, you ask? Certainly not for you, the guy who replaces expensive engines, who spends a fortune on maintenance, who hears from his mechanic that the engine just wore out. The first time I heard about this was on an ordinary afternoon, out in rural Kentucky. An older gentleman was changing the oil on a tractor that was rusted on the outside, but running on the inside like it just rolled off the line. I asked what oil he used. He showed me a can with no well-known brand on it. Then he reached into the pocket of his coveralls, pulled out a small bottle, and held it up in front of me. He said 3 flat words, "This is everything." And he tipped that bottle into the engine's oil pan with the calm of a man who has repeated the same move for 30 years. Because that move has never let him down. What that man had in his hand is exactly what you're going to learn about today. And before you think this is just talk for guys who rebuild engines from scratch in the garage, stick with me. Because what I'm going to show you in the next few minutes works on any engine you already own. Your F-150 with 150,000 miles on the clock, the Silverado you bought used, the old Crown Vic you don't have the heart to sell, the generator sitting forgotten in the shed. It even works if the only thing you've ever opened under the hood is the dipstick. If you enjoy this kind of content that saves you money and keeps you from getting burned, drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell, because this video is just the beginning. There is a document published by the U.S. Army Air Service in 1919, titled Technical Bulletin 119, Lubrication of Aircraft Engines. This document describes the official decision to move away from a vegetable-based oil that had kept American military engines running reliably for over a decade. The decision wasn't technical, it was economic. And the mechanics who still remembered the results of that oil said at the time that it was the biggest step backward in the history of lubrication. That document still exists, and what it describes could completely change the way you take care of your engine starting this week. But to understand why this fluid matters so much today, you first need to know what was taken out of your motor oil without a single word of warning, no explanation, no announcement. Up until 2004, every motor oil for gasoline-powered vehicles made in the United States contained a compound called ZDDP. The full name is zinc dialkyl dithiosphide. You don't need to memorize that name, you just need to understand what it does. When an engine is running, metal surfaces compress against each other at thousands of revolutions per minute, at temperatures well above 400 degrees Fahrenheit. ZDDP forms a microscopic protective layer over those metal surfaces exactly when it's needed most. Not after the engine warms up, but from the very first crank of the morning. A shield that rebuilds itself continuously while the engine runs. In 1992, motor oil rated API-SG contained 1,000 parts per million of phosphorus, which is the active component in ZDDP. That concentration was the industry standard for decades. Mechanics back then would break in a new engine, run it right, and expect it to reach 200,000 miles without ever needing to be opened up. That wasn't the exception, that was the norm. And the main reason wasn't that engines back then were better than today's, it was that the oil was doing something that today's oil simply doesn't do anymore. In 2004, the American Petroleum Institute introduced a new classification for gasoline engine oils, called API-SM. That certification cut the maximum allowable phosphorus down to 800 parts per million, with a minimum of just 600. In practice, that means the oil you buy today at Walmart or the auto parts store contains less than half the protective agent that oil from 30 years ago had. The official reason was to protect modern catalytic converters. Phosphorus from ZDDP, they said, can contaminate them over time. Technically that's true, but here's the part nobody ever explained to you. Catalytic converters are parts that dealers and shops charge between $1,500 and $4,000 to replace. Engines that wear out without adequate protection cost between $6,000 and $15,000 to rebuild. The decision to protect the catalytic converter at the expense of the engine wasn't made by engineers looking at durability data. It was made in boardrooms where somebody calculated which part generates more profit when it fails. And while that decision was being quietly implemented at the refineries, no letter arrived in your mailbox, no press release went out, no new warning appeared on oil bottles. The oil still looked the same, still smelled the same, but it wasn't the same anymore. The Society of Tribalogists and Lubrication Engineers published studies documenting that engines built before 1987, which use a flat tappet camshaft design instead of the roller-style design in modern engines, suffer accelerated wear on the camshaft when low ZDDP oils are used. The engineers at Comp Cams, one of the most respected camshaft manufacturers in the business, put it in writing themselves. Today's oil can take an engine 60,000 miles without any visible problems, but the camshaft is deteriorating in silence. The wear is slow, cumulative, and when it finally shows up, it looks like a sudden failure. It isn't. But ZDDP isn't the only problem. There is something that happens on every engine startup, no matter the make, no matter the year, that the oil industry is not going to volunteer to tell you. The first 30 seconds after you turn the key are the most destructive moments in the entire life of that engine. At that moment the oil is cold, it's thick, it hasn't fully circulated, it hasn't reached all the friction surfaces yet. And in those 30 seconds of cold startup, according to tribology studies published by the Society of Automotive Engineers, more than 60% of all the wear an engine accumulates over its entire lifespan happens. 60% in 30 seconds, every single time you start the car. Synthetic oil manufacturers use exactly that statistic to justify the price of their products. Synthetic flows faster in the cold, they say, and that's true. But synthetic oil also costs 4 times more than conventional. And in engines with more than 100,000 miles on them, it can start seeping past seals and gaskets that were sized for different viscosities. So you solve one problem and create another. This is where what I found that afternoon out in Kentucky comes in, and what I later confirmed in technical archives that no mainstream automotive magazine has ever mentioned. And look, if you already own a vehicle and you're thinking all of this only applies to guys building engines from scratch in the garage, stay with me, because what comes next is specifically for you. For the guy with a 2003 Silverado with 130,000 miles on the odometer. For the guy who keeps a diesel generator that only runs when the power goes out. For the guy who has a tractor working the same land for 2 decades. Everything I'm about to describe can be applied at your next oil change. No mechanic, no shop, no special tools needed. Even today, if you want to see it for yourself, out in rural communities across Tennessee and the Midwest there are families driving the same vehicles for 30, 40, even 50 years. Not because they can't afford something newer, but because they learn to maintain what they have in a way that makes replacement completely unnecessary. I visited a family in rural Tennessee that has a 1979 Ford F-250, original engine, never rebuilt, with over 400,000 miles on the odometer. The man who drives that truck, an older fella they call Earl, told me he has never opened that engine for internal work. He just changes the oil. And he always adds something extra before putting in the fresh oil. When I asked what that something was, he walked over to a wooden shelf in the corner of his shop, picked up an amber-colored bottle, the same one you can find at any pharmacy for under $10, and showed it to me without any ceremony, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. To understand why this works, you need to know a story that starts in 1917, over the skies of France. During World War I, the pilots of the American Expeditionary Forces faced a problem that threatened the entire air campaign. The rotary engines powering the combat aircraft were seizing up regularly on the longer missions. The mechanics tested every petroleum oil available, and none of them survived the combination of extremely high RPM and extreme heat those engines produced. Then someone proposed using castor oil. Castor oil is a vegetable oil pressed from the seeds of the Ricinus communis plant. It had been used for centuries as a traditional remedy. Rural communities across America used it to protect wagon axles, mill gears, and the metal parts of farm tools. It was the lubricant of people who worked with their hands and needed things to last. Old-timers and farming families have known about this product for generations, and chances are your grandfather had a bottle of it somewhere in the house. When the mechanics put castor oil into the rotary engines of the Newport 28s and SPADXIIs, something nobody expected happened. Operating temperatures dropped, friction decreased in measurable ways, and engines that used to fail after 20 hours of flight started completing 40, 60, 80 hours without a single incident. The American air units adopted castor oil as the standard lubricant for their engines, and the results were so consistent that the practice spread across the Allied aviation effort in the European theater. The technical reason behind it is this. Castor oil has a property that lubrication engineers call polar adhesivity. Its molecules actively bond to metal surfaces. They don't wait for the engine to reach operating temperature. They don't depend on oil circulation. From the very first instant after startup, the molecules of castor oil are already clinging to the cylinder walls, the camshaft, the crankshaft bearings, forming a protective layer before any other oil has reached those points. That is exactly what the engine needs during those critical first 30 seconds that were previously left completely unprotected. And here's something that's going to make you look at a brand you've probably known for years in a completely different way. The company that is now called Castrol took its name directly from this oil. Castor oil. Castrol. The name says it all. It was founded in 1899, specifically to sell castor oil-based lubricants to the automotive industry that was just getting started. For the first 5 decades of the 20th century, it was the preferred lubricant of racing drivers, military aviators, and mechanics operating under extreme conditions. You think it's a coincidence that Castrol sponsored major motorsport series around the world for decades? It isn't. Their entire origin is this oil. Then came 1929, and the U.S. Army Air Corps published its own internal directive phasing out castor oil for military aviation lubricants. The official justification was that petroleum oils had improved enough to be a viable alternative. The real justification was simpler, colder, and more profitable. Petroleum oils were far cheaper to produce at industrial scale. They blended more easily with refinery additives and generated profit margins that castor oil, pressed from a cultivated plant, simply could not compete with. By 1935, castor oil had virtually disappeared from all commercial automotive oils in the industrialized world. But nobody told the families living far from industrial supply chains that they should stop using what had worked for generations. In rural communities across America, that knowledge was never interrupted. It was passed from father to son, the way anything that truly works gets passed down, without a textbook, without a technical manual, without needing to explain why, because the results explain themselves. Earl's son uses straight castor oil, buys it at the pharmacy in town, and adds a small amount at every oil change. A 16-ounce bottle runs about $8 to $12, and it lasts through several oil changes. He has been doing this for over 35 years with the same engine. 35 years. Same engine. Now I'm going to tell you exactly how to do this. No mystery, no runaround. Number 1. Find 100% pure castor oil. Not castor oil with fragrance added, not a cosmetic blend, not capsules. Pure 100% castor oil, topical or food grade. You'll find it in the natural oils or personal care section of any large pharmacy, health food store, or on Amazon. The price runs between $8 and $18 per bottle depending on the brand. And one bottle lasts through several oil changes. Number 2, when you do your next oil change, before you pour in the fresh oil, add the castor oil directly into the oil pan. If you have a 4-cylinder engine with under 100,000 miles, 2 ounces is enough. If you have a 6 or 8-cylinder engine, or any engine with over 120,000 miles on it, use 4 ounces. Don't go over that amount. Castor oil doesn't mix perfectly with mineral oil at room temperature, and in excess it can alter viscosity in a way that provides no benefit. Number 3. Add the motor oil you normally use. The quantity recommended by the manufacturer doesn't change. Castor oil doesn't replace your motor oil, it complements it. It's the component that motor oil lost when somebody decided it was no longer convenient to include it. Number 4. Start the engine. Let it idle for 3 minutes before you drive off. The castor oil needs to circulate with the initial heat to distribute itself evenly. After those 3 minutes, it's already on every surface that matters. That's all there is to it. The first difference you're going to notice is not in performance, it's in sound. After the second or third time you start the engine following that oil change, the startup is going to sound different. Smoother. Less metallic. Not because the castor oil has fixed anything, but because for the first time in a long time the metal inside your engine is covered with a protective layer during those first 30 seconds that used to be completely exposed. There's one more thing that Earl mentioned to me that day, something I haven't found in any technical manual, but that any experienced mechanic is going to recognize immediately. Castor oil also works as a passive indicator of the internal condition of the engine. When you add it for the first time to an engine that has been running on straight petroleum oil for years, the castor oil begins to gradually dissolve the varnish, sludge, and carbon deposits that have built up on the internal surfaces. Not aggressively like a strong chemical flush that can damage seals, but slowly, over the following 2 or 3 weeks. The result is that on the first oil drain after adding castor oil, the oil is going to come out darker than normal. Significantly darker. That's not a warning sign. That's exactly what should happen. It means the engine is pushing out years of buildup that have been quietly reducing its efficiency without anyone noticing. If the oil comes out very dark and thick, the engine had more internal accumulation than you expected. If it comes out relatively clean, the engine is in better shape than you thought. It's an X-ray of your engine's real condition, without opening anything, without taking the vehicle to any shop. What this channel has documented on multiple occasions is this. Knowledge that gets lost doesn't disappear. It just stays with the people who never accepted that something more expensive should replace what was working. The engines on those farm families' trucks out in Tennessee don't reach 400,000 miles because they are extraordinary mechanics. They reach it because they never stopped using what worked. And what worked is over 100 years of technical evidence behind it. From the aircraft of 1917 to the Army Air Corps directives of the 1930s that documented the abandonment of that knowledge. What the petrochemical industry took from you when it reformulated motor oil in 2004 wasn't just a chemical compound. It was the certainty that your engine was completely protected. What Earl and families like his out in the country preserved, without anyone telling them to, was exactly that certainty. And now you have it too. If you're the kind of person who believes that real knowledge doesn't disappear, it just gets buried under profit margins and technical specifications written to benefit somebody else, then you already know what to do. How many miles does your engine have on it right now? Write it in the comments. That's a concrete question. I don't want opinions. I want numbers. Because the numbers you leave down there are going to determine exactly what I cover in the next video. I want to know how far this goes when you start from the beginning, and how far it goes when someone starts at 130,000 miles. If anything you heard today was new to you, and I'm guessing at least some of it was, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. I'm not saying that just to feed an algorithm. I'm saying it because the next video documents something that Earl did right after that, before I left that afternoon. Something that has nothing to do with oil. It has to do with water, and what water does to an engine through temperature swings and the heavy rains we get here. Something no owner's manual ever mentions. It's a technique that costs almost nothing and that farmers across rural America have been using for decades, long before any manufacturer thought to put it in a manual. I haven't seen it documented anywhere else. See you then.